Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about AncestryDNA, and specifically I'm going to share with you a case study of how I'm using DNA and traditional genealogy research to break through a very long-standing brick wall in my own family tree. Now, I haven't solved it yet, and so I was a little hesitant to share it with you, but I've had enough people ask me about it that I thought it might be useful to walk you through my process and where I am today, and then when I do solve it, I will share a follow-up video. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'll share with you kind of the basics of the brick wall problem, and then I'll share with you what I'm doing with DNA to help solve it specifically. So here's the case study. My great-great-grandfather, we believe, is a man named John O'Brien. Now, we've come to a conclusion that he was born in the 15th of May, 1841 in Ohio. However, we do have a lot of conflicting evidence regarding his birth. Some records place his birth date as early as 1837. Some place them as late as 1849. His birthplace is listed as Ohio, Iowa, Ireland. So lots of conflicting evidence. But based on the evidence that we have collected so far and some of the ways that we've resolved some of that conflicting evidence, this is where we have settled for now as his birth date. Now, we do have some military enlistment information for him. He enlisted on the 15th of July, 1861 in Iowa, and we have that from his enlistment papers, and the reason that we know that that's him out of all of the John O'Briens, and there are many of them, is because the information about the company that he served in is on his tombstone in Fayetteville, Arkansas, the military cemetery there. So we've got some information that he was in Iowa at some point. Now, the earliest census that we've been able to locate him on is the 1880 census in White River, Arkansas. Now, that's significant because we can't locate him in the 1870 census, cannot locate him in the 1860 census, even though we know where in Iowa he enlisted, and we cannot locate him on the 1850 census. Now, there are a lot, like I said, a lot of John O'Briens. The problem is just determining which one is him. So we've been able to locate John O'Brien on those census records, but narrowing down or identifying which one is him has been a pretty monumental task. And a lot of it has to do with the inconsistency in his stated birth date and birthplace, or age and birthplace over time. Now, in the 1880 census, it's important to note that he is listed as widowed. And so we've been looking for a prior marriage record and have yet to find that. It also is interesting to note that in the 1880 census, he is living with another family and is listed as a farmhand. And it's the family of the woman that he would marry 5 years later, Eliza Jones. Now, Eliza Jones, we have her life very well documented. We know who her parents are. We've got a lot of information about this particular family. She was born in 1846 in Tennessee. In October of 1863, she married her first husband, Daniel Lewis. He then went on to Texas and was actually died or was killed there. There's some conflicting information. In early 1870, we have yet to find a specific marriage record, but in early 1870, she married her second husband, Joel Ramsey, and it's the Joel and Eliza Ramsey family that John O'Brien is living with in the 1880 census. At some point, Joel died. Now, we have a suspicion that he may have actually died before the census was taken, and that whoever gave the census taker the information just listed him as the head of household. And one of the reasons that is because it has been stated that the child that was born to Eliza in late 1880 is actually the child of John O'Brien. So lots of fishy stuff going on here. 3 separate husbands. She had 11 children born between 1866 and 1887. There is a 12th there is rumors of a 12th child, but we have yet to identify that particular child. But being able to ascribe which children go with which husband has been something of a challenge. Now, here are some of the 11 children of Eliza Jones. So she has a daughter, Margaret Lewis, who, if our records are correct, she had 2 children. Eliza had 2 children with her first husband, Daniel Lewis, and Margaret is one of those children. Then she had several children with her second husband, and Anne, we believe, she goes by Anne or Nan, alternately in records, is a child of that second marriage. And then she had several more children by my ancestor, John O'Brien, Mary and Ada being 2 of those. Now, Ada May is my grandmother, my great-grandmother. I'm actually named after her. Vernon down here is my grandfather. So here's what these other boxes represent. So Margaret had several children. Each of these women had several children. But what I've represented here is the branches of the family who have taken DNA tests. Okay, so there are children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of William and Talbert who have been DNA tested. There are grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Carl and Vera who have DNA tested. And then in this family, and this is probably because it's my family and I'm a little obsessive about DNA testing, there are children of every one of these men who have also tested. So with my DNA matches, I can look at my match list, and it will show me that all of the children in these families who have tested all come up appropriately as either siblings or first cousins, because Ada May is their grandmother. So then what I'm looking for are second cousins. Well, any of Mary's grandchildren who've tested would be second cousins to the grandchildren of Ada May, right? So if you have the same grandparents, then you are first cousins. If you have the same great-grandparents, then you are second cousins. And if you have the same great-great-grandparents, then you are third cousins, okay? That seems pretty simple, and it's a pretty easy math formula at that level, but then you have to take into consideration that Mary and Ada May are full sisters, but Anne and Margaret are their half-sisters. So you actually have to half the relationship genetically. So that means that the grandchildren of Mary and Ada May will be second cousins to one another, but they will be half second cousins to the grandchildren of Margaret and Anne. And so that it will affect the amount of shared DNA between these groups of people. And so what you may see is somebody that is a half second cousin may show up in the third cousin or even fourth cousin bucket on your AncestryDNA cousin match list because of that half relationship and also because of just the random inheritance of DNA. We get 50% of our DNA from our father and 50% of our DNA from our mother. But they might not have given us an equal portion of the DNA that they received from each of their parents. So there's that random inheritance component that you have to take into consideration. So because I've tested children from each of these men, or they have been tested of their own volition, we know that Ada May O'Brien really is our grandmother, great-grandmother in my case. And that's important because she died when my grandfather was 2. Most of us, none of us living knew her. And so that's important to validate the connection one generation at a time. Now, Mary has grandchildren and great-grandchildren who have tested, and they come up appropriately related to the children in this particular family. And the children and grandchildren of William, Talbert, and Carl also come up appropriate related with the expected half relationship. So what that does is it gives us confidence that Eliza Jones really is the mother of each of these children. And because of the way that the DNA shows up as a little bit less than we would expect from these branches of the family, we're fairly confident that each of these women did in fact have separate fathers. Now, the genealogy problem that I'm trying to solve is, who were the parents of John O'Brien? And that's my specific genealogy question. Whenever you're doing family history research, especially when you're working on what we call a brick wall, it's really important to formulate a question that is specific to what it is you're trying to solve, because it'll help you look at the evidence that you're collecting in the appropriate light. So if I come back to this chart here, if I know that these two women, or if that's the assumption that I'm working under, is that these two women, Mary and Ada May, were fathered by John O'Brien, and that these two children, Margaret and Anne, were not, then what I need to do is be looking for differences between the matches of the descendants of Margaret and Anne and the matches that are between the descendants of Mary and Ada May. So I'm going to have to start creating lists and spreadsheets to keep track of the differences. Now, any matches they all have in common, that's going to be important if I was researching Eliza's family, because she is their common ancestor. But again, because I'm looking for the differences between these, the parentage, the paternal side of these two families, I have to look at the differences. So I'm going to come over here. Here's my family tree. You can see here's my grandfather. Here's Ada May, my great-grandmother. Here's John and Eliza. And you can see we've got this giant hole here where we need to figure out who John O'Brien's parents are. So I can come here and I can just double check that I've got all of the children in my tree associated with the correct father. So Eliza had these 11, possibly 12 children with 3 different men. So I've got the 2 children that were fathered by Daniel Lewis, and the several children here fathered by Joel Ramsey, and then the children fathered by John O'Brien. Okay. So I make sure that I've got all the genealogical evidence collected and all that information attached to the right, well-sourced and well-documented, that I've analyzed it, made sure that I've got all my pieces in the right place, and then I can start working with my DNA matches. So here is a DNA match through the John O'Brien line. And so I can click on Shared Matches, and it will show me a list of all of the people who also share DNA with my mom. This is my mom's test, and this particular match. And it gives me a list up to 4th cousins, which is actually exactly the range where we want to be looking. And you can see I've identified who some of them are, and in many cases it's Eliza Jones, or it is the parents of Eliza Jones. And so what I'm looking for are the unidentified individuals, the people who I don't know. So here is an individual who I haven't figured out who she is. She has a fairly decent sized tree. So then I want to come over here to this match. Now this match is an Eliza Jones descendant through another one of those children from a different spouse. So I'm going to scroll down through her match list, and I'm going to look for, here's this same match. Okay, so the same match shows up on both lists. What that tells me is that this person is likely related through the Jones line, through Eliza's family. Okay, so it's because it's the same, and Eliza's the common ancestor. That's how that connection is likely going to be found out. What I'm looking for are differences. What matches do the descendants of John O'Brien have that the descendants of Joel Ramsey and Daniel Lewis do not have? And the hope is, so that's the process that I'm working on right now, is who are the matches of John O'Brien descendants that do not match Lewis and Ramsey descendants, and hopefully one of them will have an O'Brien in their tree. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind and just remember as you're doing this. One is you need to make sure that there are enough people tested in each family line that you have enough data to work with. Because of the way that DNA is inherited, things get lost with every generation. So because my grandfather is deceased, I can't test him, but I've tested my mom and I've tested her sister. Several of their first cousins on that side of the family have been tested. That gives me enough data about their grandmother's DNA to be able to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So the more people you have tested in a single family line, particularly when you're trying to solve a brick wall, the better it's going to be. You're going to be able to come to more accurate conclusions more quickly. Just keep in mind that whole random inheritance of DNA. If you're not sure what that means, if this is one of the first videos you've watched about AncestryDNA, I would highly recommend that you go to the AncestryDNA playlist on the Ancestry YouTube channel and check out some of our FAQ videos. Anna Swain and I talk about random inheritance in a lot of detail, explain exactly what it is, how it works, and why it affects our results sometimes. And so just keep that in mind as you're looking at this. Another thing you need to be really cautious about is to just not get too impatient. I tested my mom 3 years ago when AncestryDNA first came out, and I didn't test my aunt until just this last year. So we're slowly getting family members tested. And as more family members get tested, more results or more matches start connecting. And then as people in other branches of the family start testing, they start showing up as connections. And so sometimes you just have to be patient and wait for the right people to be tested. Sometimes you have to be a little bit proactive about who you're testing. So the last time there was a DNA sale, and there's actually one going on right now till the end of today. If you're watching this video on the day that we publish it, it is Tuesday, April 26th. Yesterday, April 25th, was International DNA Day, and so Ancestry has a sale going on until the end of the day today, April 26th. Where you can get that DNA kit for 20% off. And so whenever there's a sale, I'll squirrel away a few dollars so that I can buy a few extra kits and just have them available so that when I do find people to test or when I do have a theory that I want to try out, I can actually reach out and contact some of these second or third or fourth cousins who I probably have never spoken to before and invite them to take a DNA test. And if they are not willing or in a position to be able to purchase a kit themselves, then I have an extra kit or two, usually that I've saved up for so that I can have them tested. But you have to be patient and you have to be willing to test your theories. And if you're not in a position to be able to test your theories, you have to be really patient. I think that's probably my point there, which is the more people test, the more data we have to work with. But sometimes we have to be the ones who proactively go out and test some of these people. So if I come back to my tree view here, once I go through each of the common matches and look for those differences, hopefully what I'll find is somebody who has an O'Brien in their tree. So the theory is if John had brothers who had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who have been tested, then I should be able to identify who this particular couple is. I also have to keep in mind that John's mother likely has a different last name. Typically that's the case, not in my Jones family. We have lots of cousin marriage happening there. But in the O'Brien case, I'm hoping his mother has a different last name, which means her parents would have different last names. John's father's mother would have a different last name. And so I can't get too hung up on the O'Brien name, because the only way that I might see an O'Brien in a tree is if John had siblings who had identified who this couple happens to be, and that those siblings have descendants who have tested. Hopefully that makes sense, but again, that's kind of what we're working with as we sort through all of this, these DNA matches. We're looking for those connections. I would probably be paying a lot of attention to anybody who was living in Ohio in the 1840s, since we're fairly certain that's where we've decided that John was born. That doesn't mean that this couple was born in Ohio, just that they likely would have been living there about the time that John was born. It's very possible that at some point this couple then moved to Iowa, since that's where John enlisted in the military. Or John could have just gone on to Iowa himself as a teenager or a young adult. But those are kind of the patterns that I'm looking for in the family trees of these unique matches, and that's the process that I'm working through right now. It does take some time. Like I said, I have not solved this yet, and I will do a follow-up when I do solve it so that you can see how it all worked out. But a lot of you have been asking me about my process, and so that's just the process that I use, and it doesn't matter if it's an unknown great-great-great-grandparent, which is the case for me here, or if it's an unknown parent or an unknown grandparent, the process is still exactly the same. So hopefully that all made sense. If you have questions about this, we will post a link to the video on the Facebook event page, on the Ancestry Facebook page, and you can feel free to ask your questions there. Or if you're watching this video directly on YouTube, feel free to post your questions. I will review and respond to those as necessary. That's all I have for you today. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.